Heyo Minecraft fans, it's Collins. Here's the next episode of Practical Mechanism, 5 times ore processing. If you guys have been following along, we did ore quadrupling last episode, so now we're going to look at 5 times ore processing, or quintupling. So there's a bunch of machines that we need. We need to make a couple more of these chemical infusers. We can make another chemical injection chamber. It's kind of optional, we'll look into that. You need this chemical oxidizer, you need a rotary condensator, and then the 3 parts that we need for the 5 times ore processing are the chemical dissolution chamber, the chemical washer, and the chemical crystallizer. So we take our 4 times ore setup, which puts hydrogen chloride in this injection factory, and we're going to tack onto that. And since this is mostly using mechanism, we have just a bunch of power cables here, and then we have the 3 machines up on the top. So the chemical dissolution chamber needs sulfuric acid, and we'll look at that in a second. And you can pump that in from the side, and you can pump items in from the top, and then it'll output on this side, so it goes straight into the chemical washer, which does need water, and we're piping that in from the top, and then it'll output on the side. And we have this chemical crystallizer. We can change the side configs on these, so I just set it to eject out the top, and then from here it goes into our 4 times processing system. So now to get this sulfuric acid, there's a bunch of stuff we need to do. So I mentioned we need 2 of these chemical infusers. So you need water vapor and sulfur trioxide. So the water vapor just comes from water. So we had a water source over here, we're tapping into it, we're putting it in our chemical washer, we're also sending it into a rotary condensator, and make sure you toggle this so it's deconcentrating. What a word. And that goes into a chemical infuser. So that's water vapor. And then we need sulfur trioxide, which comes from sulfur dioxide, and then oxygen. So we took our oxygen line and we ran it over here into the second chemical infuser, and then the other side of that is a chemical oxidizer, which takes sulfur and turns it into sulfur dioxide. And you're going to have to figure out how to do sulfur. So sulfur comes from, you can, there's a bunch of ways to make it within mechanism. Gravel, flint, and gunpowder are good ways to do that. So we can take a look at this. This is where we have to go off the beaten path and not just use mechanism. So sulfur you can get from gunpowder. You have to inject hydrogen chloride. So in this case we've tapped into our hydrogen chloride line and we've sent it into another chemical injection. So we don't even have to do the factory version. We can just do a basic version of this. And we're injecting hydrogen chloride into gunpowder to get sulfur. And we're getting gunpowder from flint by crushing it, and then we're using thermal expansion to pulverize gravel into flint, and sand's a byproduct, so you can see sand just being shot up the top there. Our gravel comes from another crusher which turns cobble into gravel, and then we're using a thermal expansion igneous extruder to produce cobble. If you're not going to use this method, most likely you'll want to have like some sort of mob farm that has creepers and stuff to get gunpowder that way. That is another option. And then we have to look at this. So I've been running this for a while. So there's a bunch of brine and a bunch of chlorine, and the chlorine and the hydrogen have gone in and made hydrogen chloride. This version, I took the tank out, yeah. This version, the hydrogen chloride is just going into our system, so we do have it going into 2 injection chambers. And like I said, we're still using primarily mechanism, so that's why we have all this mechanism stuff. If you have, say, Ender IO conduits, you could probably, tighten this up, but this gives you a good view of what's going on. So, chemical dissolution chamber, chemical washer, chemical crystallizer. If we take some ore, not wood, if we take some ore and stick it in there, we are going to get ore slurry. So we'll get some gold slurry, and then we're going to get some iron slurry. The slurry gets washed in the washer. It turns into clean slurry. That is going to turn into these crystals, and then the crystals go into the 4x system. And if you've been following along, we have a little tiny brine factory, so we're not producing a whole lot of brine, but you set this system up, you get 5x ore processing going, and then this is where you start doing, you know, multiplying your copper by 5 times so you can build a bigger salination plant. So we have over there in our little wannabe desert chunk a salination plant, and we're putting it in the desert because when it rains, it doesn't rain in the desert, and that thing will still function in the desert. Another option for that is if you have like a Mistcraft or something like that, where you can get a special dimension that is daylight all the time, then you would probably want to run that in that. But until you get to that point, you know, a desert's a good thing to do. And like I said, we have that chunk loaded. So this is our 5x ore processing system. What you'll want to do with this is make sure you get your energy upgrades in these things as soon as possible, because they're pretty energy hungry. Even with 8 upgrades, this thing takes a lot of power. And then you're going to have to look at the speed on everything else. So right now these have 2 speed upgrades in all of these machines from our 4x ore processing. And then we have a couple, I think 1 speed upgrade in each of these. And you can stick 8 speed upgrades in here, but really the bottleneck in this system is going to be getting the different slurries from the different types. And this is kind of where we go off the beaten path. So what you'll want to do to upgrade this is, for starters, you're going to need some more brine. So process some more copper and upgrade your salination plant. And then once you get to the point where you have enough brine and you have enough of this hydrogen chloride, what you'll want to do is actually run this slurry line of the liquid metals. So what we do is we would place a second set of these, and this just has to be set to output and eject, and then that should be good. So we run 2 sets of these, and this is, I don't think it functions the way we would want it to do with the mechanism conduit, but if you have thermal expansion or Ender IO, you can set your output from your input system to do a round robin where it will split back and forth. That way you can get like gold slurry running in one and iron slurry running in another, and then you can expand this by adding like a 3rd set of machines. And you can see these use a lot of power. There's 180 RF. That one's not doing anything right now. 200 RF. So you definitely want to get speed upgrades in here, or energy upgrades in here. And that'll bring the energy usage down. And then maybe 1 or 2 speed upgrades. I think we have 3 speed upgrades for these, 1 for each. So if it's taking all the energy, we can give it 1 speed. And then this is where we get into customization, because now that we have our 5x ore processing, we can process ore, we can build all the extra machines, we can upgrade our salination tower, and then we have to look at where all of our bottlenecks are. One of the bottlenecks is going to be how much brine you can get, so you definitely want to expand your salination plant. Another kind of bottleneck is the electrolytic separator, which if you're using the hydrogen for power, it's going to use hydrogen, produce power. The power is going to go into the electrolytic separator, and you're basically going to have a loop. So, like if I had this to dump excess oxygen, the hydrogen will never actually fill up because it'll take power, which means it needs more hydrogen, which means it produces more power, which means it uses more power. It'll just go in a loop. So we can look at ways to to get this thing to stop like running the whole time, because otherwise it'll just run in a big loop, which may not be a big deal for you if you have a bunch of power. The other option is, instead of hydrogen, you can just add more solar panels or windmills or both, or one or the other depending on how you have it set up. Or if you have some other form of RF generation, you can do that. So that's 5x ore processing. I think in the next practical mechanism, what we'll look at is we'll look at some ways to optimize this system to get like controls on these things, set up our hydrogen and oxygen system, and even set up our brine production. to get some backup, some backstock and stuff like that. So that's 5 times ore processing. Once you get this going, like I said, get some ores processed, upgrade your salination tower. This thing will go 18 blocks tall, so that's like a whole bunch of copper, a whole bunch of iron. And that's Practical Mekanism. So thanks everybody for watching. Thanks everybody who likes and subscribes, and we'll catch you guys later.